So we started a retreat, and so much gratitude to the organizers for inviting me to teach. It's an honor. I learn a lot, and I like to meditate. So, and this morning, Venerable Amar Siri has joined me. I'm in the monks' library, our favorite room here in the monastery. And the other monks are doing whatever other monks are doing. So we began by paying homage to the Buddha and trying to bring significance to that, to those phrases, because one of the ways you could look at Buddhism is that it's an exploration of desire and non-desire. So desire is natural, and sometimes it's skillful and sometimes it's unskillful. So if I'm thirsty, I just drank some water. But if I'm restless, I do something to follow the restlessness. That doesn't give a good result. Drinking the water gives a good result. So understanding desire rather than having an opinion about it, that it's bad or something like that, is the way of investigation. And when you have something which fulfills your heart, then you touch what we mean by non-desire. Non-desire, sometimes you could say it's Nirod in Thai, the third noble truth. And to contemplate the ways of non-desire, rather than struggling with desire, is another way of educating yourself, another way of understanding. So this reflection on homage to the Buddha is an entrance into the beauty of one aspect of non-desire. And it's very fulfilling. It's very fulfilling, and it's a basis for enlightenment, because it's not something about getting an external experience, a distracting experience, or owning something, or getting what you want per se, but rather it's something that you bring up from your own wisdom, your own resources, and that connects you to something which isn't selfish. So when I reflect on, see, we have many Buddha images here. So there's a beautiful image up there. I can look at that, and I can look at it and think, oh, it's bronze or it's brass. Is it brass? It looks like a Thai image. So I can comment on its aesthetic. I like it. I don't like it. But that doesn't really bring me to a sense of gratitude, or a sense of devotion, or a sense of awe. Whereas if I look at that and I think, well, who was this person? Who was the Buddha? Who was this compassionate being that it has affected me so strongly? And sometimes I find it more difficult with a Buddha image to do that, because my mind tends to go into the aesthetics. It's an abstract. But if I use a picture of Luangpor, like here we have Luangpor Liam, Luangpor Cha, Luangpor Man, Luangpor Sumedho, Luangpor's all over the place. Wall-to-wall Luangpors. And but if I just hold my gaze on, say, Luangpor Liam, whose picture is on the wall across from me, I know him very well. I think he's enlightened, and he's just a very beautiful being. If I just look at that and I remember him, that brings me to a place in the heart which is very fulfilling, but it's not from desire. I'm not doing it out of selfish desire. I'm entering into that because that's a potential that is in my heart, because we all can feel gratitude and we can feel awe. And you could see how entering into meditation from that perspective, rather than technique or getting something or getting rid of something, entering from the sense of devotion or awe or gratitude, set your mind up in the place of non-desire. And if your mind is in the place of non-desire, it then knows Dhamma. Whereas if you enter into meditation from a place of desire, like you had a really good experience last retreat, now you want to repeat that experience, that's desire. If you're not aware of that desire, you feel very frustrated, because you really won't know Dharma. You'll be programmed by a previous experience. So entering into meditation from non-desire is, and more than just non-desire, I think from the heart rather than from the head, rather than from ideas and thoughts and views and opinions about what should take place. If you enter from the heart, it's not an opinion, right? It's just the way it is. And there's a wisdom there from the heart, isn't there? There's an understanding from the heart, which isn't an opinion or a judgment or whatever. So I would say to you then, when you begin meditation, how do you begin? Do you just sort of, how do you begin? What would be a skillful way to begin your meditation? And this would be a very traditional way to do it, but you wouldn't want it just to be a dead tradition that has no life in it. You'd want it to be enlivened, and that would be up to your mind and your heart. Hence, we have these rituals in Buddhist cultures, bowing, a shrine which has some decoration out of respect, a golden image, bright, enlightened, these kinds of ideas. So do consider when you enter into meditation to try to right away come to that skillful place of non-desire. Another way is love, of Karanyametta Sutta. Like we'll end this meeting with the English version of the Karanyametta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle speech. So you can use language, right? Not just as a discursive thing that's going on automatically in your head, but you can use language to remember that which is wholesome and skillful. So beginning a meditation with the Karanyametta Sutta in English or Pali or Thai or whatever language you want, something that evokes that sense of kindness. So then if awareness is conjoined with kindness, I think it has the perfect balance. When awareness or mindfulness doesn't have kindness in it, it can very easily veer off into control, into trying to get something, trying to get rid of something. But when sati is conjoined with metta, and I think that they are one thing, I would say. Ultimately, sama sati must have this sense of open-heartedness and acceptance in it. I think it would be lacking if it does not, because we are beings of heart. We're not just intellectual structures, right? We're not just analytical beings. So if you can enter into that, it's as you would like homage to the Buddha, homage to your teacher, you can enter into that space of kindness in whatever manner you like to do. Then the sati, awareness, has this openness and acceptance into it, and it knows Dharma. Whereas again, if I'm just coming from some technique that I'm doing, or some sense that I have a lot of work to do and I have a lot of kilesa and I have to fight my kilesa, that kind of language, or then the open acceptance and receptivity of the mind won't be available. So like Luangpor Viradhammo teaches a kind of, and I like to think of that too, receptive awareness. You're receiving this moment. The language you'll find me using, I'll use the language like make conscious. That's maybe a strange way to use language, but when I ask you to listen to sound, make conscious the sound. So I'm not, like when I talk about meditation, I'm not talking about concentration. Concentration for me is something I do in the workshop. Maybe I'm using a power saw. It's very dangerous. And I need to be very accurate, so I concentrate. But when I ask you to listen to sound, I'm not asking you to concentrate on the sound. I'm suggesting let sound become conscious. So it doesn't matter if it's the chipmunks or it's a lawnmower going or it's a loud car. It doesn't really matter what the sound is, because what we're emphasizing is awareness rather than the objects of awareness. This is important. If you're emphasizing the objects of awareness, you need to sometimes, I'm in the workshop, I'm cutting a piece of maple. It's a powerful saw. I once put this thumb into a power saw. Can you see the difference in size? Ta-da, ta-da. This one got half chopped off and I had to stick it back on. So I'm very careful. Very dangerous place, right? So that's, to me, concentration. And so I'm concerned about the object of attention. But when I meditate, I'm concerned about awareness itself, because I think awareness is the place of peace rather than the objects of awareness, right? So that's why I use the language like make conscious sound, let sound come into consciousness, know that sound is in awareness. This is the language I use. And then if you then just go to another sense base, make conscious the feelings in your hands. You feel heat or tactile sensation. I'm not concentrating. I'm letting that become conscious. And then I notice that awareness is the same both for the sound and for the tactile sensation. Oh, and that's what I want to go to, because that isn't dependent on the quality of the sound or the quality of the body. That's where peace lies. So I would ask you then, like, how do you use the word concentration in meditation? I'm not saying I am right, but I do differentiate in my own mind how I use that language. And then in terms of mindfulness, sama, sati, what would be right mindfulness? Well, for me, it would be when I can include everything. Now, that doesn't mean I approve of everything. So if I thought mindfulness was some way of being where I'll never feel negative emotions, then I'm in trouble, because I feel negative emotions. Feel annoyed or anxious about something. This is just the nature of the emotional system. But if I have perceived samasati to be something that never experiences negative emotion, then what am I going to do when it comes up? Well, I repress it, or I think I'm wrong, or judge myself. It shouldn't be this way, which then is a complication on that. But if I see that sati is very open, it accepts all things, it rejects none. Sila rejects something. So if I have an impulse to kill an insect or to harm a rodent or something like that, no. So sila definitely has boundaries. You do this, you don't do that. But awareness, sati, to me, it seems it has to be very, very open. And what could be open but metta, loving kindness, openness of heart, accepting all things. And then from that, I can act. I can say, no, that's wrong. Don't do that. Or this is okay. Do that. But if I never come to that place of open-heartedness, then I can just be reacting from cultural ideas of what I should or shouldn't be, or from my own sense of judgment, or whatever it might be. So the awakening, Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, to me implies compassion, not just functional presence. Sati for me isn't just functional presence. Sure, sati, like if I'm mindful from here to there, and I have some electrical cords here, if I'm not mindful, I'll trip on the cords and fall down. Sure, that's a natural part of mindfulness, but is that all it is? Is it just functional presence? No, it has to be more than that, because samasati must lead to enlightenment, must be a foundation for enlightenment. So to me, it seems it's a much grander thing than just being concentrated. I need to focus, otherwise I'm going to fall, but that's not all it is. So if you, but then again, I would ask you, how do you perceive mindfulness? What is it in your lexicon, in your word system, and your own definitions of what this practice is about? Language is funny stuff, right? Each of us might use the word sati, but each of us might perceive it in a different way. So my suggestions are simply from my use of language and the way I've defined things for myself. But those definitions are really beyond words. It's something I know intuitively. And that's the idea of sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension. With experience, you just know what you're talking about, and then you try to explain it. It's rather difficult. So it has to be something that that instills confidence in you. So if I use language differently than you're used to, then question your own language. So what do I mean that? What do I mean by sati? And what do I mean by namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa? What is that? Is there meaning in that, or is it just words that we use as a Buddhist community? So I thought what would be interesting, at least for the first part of this retreat, is to explore the word trust. Now, some of you have been probably listening to Luangpor Viradhammo's talks. We have, for sure. And he's in a very lion roar kind of Dhamma these days. He's just full of inspiration and confidence. And one of the questions that came up in one of Bita's sessions was the phrase that Luangpor keeps putting to us, saying, trust and awareness. And so the question came, well, what do you mean by trust and awareness? And rather than intellectually define trust, right? What I find with language is that, well, why don't we explore the very word trust? What is trust, and what are the synonyms of trust? And it seems to me that trust would be an entry into non-desire, right? Because trust is not desire. When I trust, it's not about me wanting or not wanting. And what would be the synonyms of trust? And what would happen if we remember those attitudes? What effect would that have on the heart over a period of time? So the way I explore trust is simply making conscious the way things are. So typically, sound is very good for me. Just listen to sound. And then that's awareness. And then I'll pop in the word trust. Just that. And then someone say, well, what do you trust in? No. Don't go beyond that. Don't go into thought. Don't analyze this. Just see, what does that word, how does that word affect you? What's the attitude that word might bring forth? And if you do that, just, I don't know how you say trust in Thai, but you all know English good enough. But when you bring up a word and when you've established awareness and presence, then you can explore. And this is the idea of Dhamma Vijaya, the exploration of the heart, of the mind. So you bring up the word trust, and then you wait. And you wait and you watch. Now that in itself is interesting, because what will happen for most people is they'll be trying to get something, some experience, or some insight into the very word trust, and desire will arise. Or they'll just start thinking, planning, regretting, resenting, whatever it might be. And you'll see it's very hard to sustain the sense of trust, whatever that might be. So it becomes a word which brings you back to the idea of refuge. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Refuge is trust. Trust is refuge. So I'd like to try to do that in some of the meditations with you. See what that feels like. Now this isn't a technique, and it takes some experience to do this. If your mind is very, very confused, then you need to do kind of a hardcore technique, usually like counting your breaths or things like that. But I think most of us have enough experience that we can explore things at a bit more subtle level. So then we can also come to, what are the synonyms of trust? What are the synonyms of non-desire? Well, gratitude. When I reflect on Luangpor Viradhammo or Luangpor Liam or Luangpor Cha or my mother or my father, and I just bring that forth, that's not desire, but it is beautiful, it is fulfilling, and it calms the mind, right? It calms the mind down. It composes the mind. It's non-desire. It's non-desire. When I think of just the animal realm, just seeing how, on one hand, the beauty of the animal realm, like we have gophers. Do you know what a gopher is? Gopher is a little ball of fur, about that big. It's just fat ball of fur, and it's totally benign. It just munches on grass and runs around afraid that the hawks will get it. Right, so it's just the cutest thing you ever saw. Right? So I can look at a gopher, and I can feel love for the gopher. It's, you know. Now, if a bear came at me, I wouldn't feel love for the bear. It would feel different. But I can look at nature and I can see the beauty in nature. We can do that, can't we? We can see a tree. We can see the shape of a rock. And that is non-desire. It's not the same as having a vanilla milkshake or sticky rice with mangoes or whatever you like to eat. That's fulfilling, but it's about sense desire and the needs of sense desire. But this sense of beauty that we can experience in the world, we call mudita. And mudita is not the same as tanha. It's not the same as tanha, is it? I can see the accomplishments of one of the monks, say, who does something very well, and I think, wow, good on you. Or one of our monks had some physical difficulties, and he found that the cause was actually some technology that he discovered, which is a great relief to him. So I had both compassion for his predicament, but also, oh, wow, he's got some relief. That's mudita. That's non-desire. That's not tanha. That's not craving, is it? So we have possibilities of entering into joy and uplift and open-heartedness, which are not based on getting a new iPhone or watching a cat video. Although cat videos I've heard are very good, or whatever you want. So this access to joy and the openness of the heart, I think, is very important in meditation, because meditation is simply fighting your kilesa, right? Or hanging in there when you're really restless, or if it's all just about the negatives of our inner experience, and we have a lot of that, and we have to deal with that. If it's only about the negatives, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard. It's hard enough as it is. But if also we have these ways of entering into the beauty of the human consciousness, which is not an attainment. I would say it's more a remembering, isn't it? It's not like you attain some, like for me to look at the gopher and have love for the gopher. It's not fourth jhana. It's very accessible. It's very much there. And mudita is very much there, where we have it. So in whatever ways you can enter into mudita, like around with your grandchildren, or your partner, or your teacher, and see the beauty of their accomplishments, or whatever it might be. Beauty has its place. Aesthetics and attachment to aesthetics is another thing, so we are choosing the wall color. We're repainting the rooms in the house. We have a house which was built in 1925, and I think last time they painted was 1926. So we need a paint job. So we have a color committee. I refuse to be on the color committee, and so the color committee has about 20 colors on the wall now, right? Greens and yellows and blues and so on, and they go up and they choose, and then they don't choose, and then so it's been going on 4 days, right? I think we got a color. So that's aesthetics, right? And that's preference, and that can be different. So some people like the color, some won't like the color. but that's that's not what mudita is about. It's not about aesthetic preference. There's nothing wrong with aesthetic preference. It's something, it's deeper than that. It's about compassion, it's about heart. And that is not selfish. Whereas my choice of aesthetics is my self-preference, and it becomes selfish when I attach to it. I think, you idiot, you got the wrong color, or something like that. But that's attachment to aesthetics. But beauty doesn't need to be that. Beauty has another possibility, and that possibility is it opens our hearts to what we call mudita in the four Brahma Viharas. So do contemplate like the wholeness of this rich tradition, beyond just a technique, right? That the imagery we have, the chanting we have, the reflections of our social interactions with compassion and joy are terribly important as a foundation. Then when we are meditating, and if material comes up, which is very negative, like old resentments come up, or old fears come up, or even present resentments come up, we can bear with them. We can witness to them. We can say, and this belongs to. Just as there's the beautiful gopher, there's also the dead gopher, or the gopher that puts a hole into my pipes. Both are happening. But if we never enter into that openness of the heart, then sometimes it's just like you're just struggling. So when sati and metta are conjoined, then when difficult things come up, we say, oh yeah, this is also part of the way it is. This is the way it is now. And in that openness, there can be a liberation from these negativities, from the resentments and fears that we all experience. And that's a kind of purification. It's not easy, it's not fun, but there's a space to allow that to happen. And then there's the kind of purification of the heart where those anusaya, those latent tendencies begin to fall away from the mind, and the mind more and more dwells in the Brahma Viharas as a natural kind of repose, not something that is structured. So I think that's sort of sufficient for tonight. We're probably ready for another 2 hours of meditation on your own. But perhaps we could close